Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fighting on Film. This week, a show and tell, which is our format where we look at a couple of films that we've watched recently and discuss whether we want to cover it in a main episode.
Yeah.
So, Rob, do you want me to go first this week or do you want to go first?
I don't mind. You go first if you like, mate.
Okay, so a little while back, I was watching Geronimo, an American Legend. And I did a live tweet over on Twitter at Fighting on Film, if you aren't already following us.
Please do.
And really enjoyed it. 1993 stars Wes Studi as Geronimo himself.
Yep.
I think I sort of came across it when just after we'd done our Last of the Mohicans episode with Jonathan Peggs.
Yeah, because you always go off and after we do these recordings, you go off and you sort of delve a little deeper into an actor or a period of history, and you always find a film that you go, oh, I can learn something from that, and it's like a little strand, isn't it?
Exactly. And I'd never seen this movie. I'd never even heard of it.
I hadn't either.
It came up, and I think it was on Netflix. It came up in my suggestions, and spotted Wes Studi in the thumbnail. I thought, okay, cool. This looks pretty good. So when you say like Geronimo, you might think, oh, it's a Western. It is a Western, but really it's a film about the Apache Wars. So It is fighting on film. And it's a really interesting depiction of the US cavalry in the 1880s, which is relatively rare. And when it is done, largely in films like from the 40s, 50s, sometimes the 60s, US cavalry are always in those like blue uniforms. They're pristine with their little yellow neckerchiefs and the little Stetson hats, and they're all armed with Winchester 1894s. And it's very rare that you see a depiction as interesting as this one. So the film opens with a band of Chiricahua Indians, Native Americans, being rounded up by Gene Hackman, who plays, I think his name is General Miles?
Right.
General Crook. Miles replaces Gene Hackman halfway through the movie as the commanding officer. The film follows the last campaigns of Geronimo and his band of Chiricahua as they are basically the last holdouts against going onto a reservation. It's towards the end of the Indian Wars, the Great Plains Wars, and Geronimo leads this band of about 40 braves, and it's left to a very young Matt Damon, Jason Patric, and Robert Duvall to sort of track him down and bring him in.
It's a great cast.
So it's a really good cast. Jason Patric plays this really soft-spoken lieutenant, and Matt Damon's sort of like a young, fresh off the boat sort of second lieutenant who's just joined I think it's 6th Cavalry.
Right.
I think it might be. Anyway, so the film begins with this band being rounded up, and it's this really interesting set piece where it shows a squadron of US cavalry basically attacking an Indian camp. Gene Hackman is great in this scene because he sort of like trots up and he's holding Colt single action army. Very cool. He gives the order advanced carbines, and they all draw their carbines out of their like saddle holsters. They all trot forward. It's a very nicely shot scene. And there's some really nice cinematography in the film. I would say it's on a par, to be honest, with Last of the Mohicans. It's completely set in like Arizona, Mexico. So it's not the lush, beautiful forests. It's the deserts, those big, expansive, gorgeous sort of like landscapes that are really, really beautiful. And the film follows Geronimo and him trying to evade the US cavalry, and he's eventually brought in. And it becomes a little bit of a tragic story in that it highlights the way that the US government treated the natives. And it becomes really powerful. The end shows them on a train to a prison camp in Florida.
Blimey.
And along the way, there's lots of set pieces and a few gunfights. Some really, really cool scenes where an Indian brave challenges Jason Patric to a one-on-one fight.
Wow.
He charges forward, and Jason Patric has his horse sort of lie down. And he takes his carbine, and he shoots the brave as he's galloping towards him.
Oh.
So he uses his horse as cover.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. Based on a book by Britton Davis, who was Matt Damon's character.
Okay.
And he basically wrote a biography of Geronimo, and he was associated with Geronimo during this period where Geronimo initially surrendered, was brought into the reservation, and then became bored and angered by the way that the Americans were treating his people, because they were just forced to be corn farmers,
right?
On a reservation. This film is really quite powerful. I really enjoyed it. I was quite surprised.
I saw you live tweeting.
By Walter Hill, who directed stuff like The Warriors and 48 Hours and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great little fact.
Really good.
I didn't know that, The Warriors. Wow.
Yeah. It apparently wasn't a super successful movie.
Right.
Didn't do great at the box office, which is a bit of a surprise because it's got a great cast. Everyone's really on form. Robert Duvall's great in it. Gene Hackman's money. Jason Patric plays a very softly spoken lieutenant, but his character is really interesting because you can see he's an instrument of the US government, and he doesn't like it. So yeah, it's a really interesting movie. I'd recommend it. I think it'd be a great one to cover on the pod.
Yeah, I saw you live tweeting
full
on
episode,
and some of the sequences you were showing on the imagery and the pictures of the cinematography that I saw. I was like, wow, this movie looks brilliant. And sometimes these films just fall through the cracks, and you never really work out why. Perhaps it's always just, you never know if a film's going to hit or not. But it looked like an absolute belter. I mean, I'll definitely sit down and watch it one night.
Yeah, the pacing isn't bad either. I thought, okay, maybe this will drag a little bit because it gets a little confusing. There's some bits where it gets a bit confusing. It's trying to tell the narrative of the real story of Geronimo.
Yep.
And there's bits where he says he's going to surrender, but then doesn't surrender, and the way the film handles some of that is a little bit confusing. But really, really interesting movie.
And I assume, being the resident firearms expert, I assume there's some great weapons on display as well.
Yeah, there is. There's some good stuff. And it's all, which is really refreshing, period correct. There's nothing ahistorical in there.
Yes.
So all the Winchesters are the correct Winchester for the period. None of them are like 1894s when they should be 86s or whatever. That kind of thing. There's
something about army service revolvers at that time. Something about them. They just have such a good look.
Yeah, Jason Patric's character even has a Remington 1875, which is a very cool revolver.
Really nice.
There's a great scene where Wes Studi has a Sharps rifle.
Right.
And he takes this super long-range shot at a posse that are chasing them. He shoots a drinking vessel out of this posse member's hand. Really cool scene.
Really nice. I love a Sharps rifle. Something about them. I mean, I think all these weapons are back in popularity because of the Red Dead Redemption games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now maybe it'd fare a little better. But no, just something about Western era, that late Western era sort of weaponry. So
yeah, and there's so many films that we could cover from.
We really could.
That deal with the Indian Wars. Most of them really badly.
Yeah, let's add that. Yeah,
really historically inaccurate movies. That we could cover on the pod, but this would be a great place to start with one that seems to do everything quite well.
Yeah. No, well, let us know what you think, guys. If you think you'd want to hear an episode on that, we always love to hear what you guys think about these show and tell episodes, whether you've seen the movies or you'd like us to go into them in more depth. So for me, this show and tell episode, a few weeks ago, you might remember, it might even be months ago by the time this one goes out, we did a live on World War II TV with Woody about The Great Escape, and that was with the fantastic Miriam Waters as well. She's, at Rentaquill on Twitter. She's great. And we talked about Steve McQueen, things like that. So after that, I had a bit of a McQueen binge. I watched some of his late work. I watched some of his early work. And then I came across Hell is for Heroes, the 1962 World War II film that he did. And it was such an interesting film because I hadn't seen Steve McQueen in a sort of... See, this is another weird Steve McQueen movie where he isn't really the main character. He's just sort of there. And he doesn't really... He has a lot to do, but he doesn't have a lot of lines. He's playing like a damaged veteran soldier who's seen some stuff and probably done some stuff that's really affected him, and he doesn't want to fight because he's been stripped of his rank and he's just a bit damaged. And then the plot of the movie is really... The production of the movie is really interesting because it's a Robert Pirosh film, who we know from Go for Broke and Battleground. And he writes the movie. He's really instrumental in... He's going to be directing it as well as writing. Then the studio get involved. They don't like what he's written. To the studio, it was too much like Gregory Peck's Pork Chop Hill. And they veto a lot of things in the script. They change a lot of things.
That's so interesting because it doesn't... Like, when I watched it, well, it must be a few years now, but none of it really seems very Pork Chop Hilly to me. So they must have done a massive rewrite.
Big cut. It was meant to be called Separation Hill, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, apparently it was based like on his unit in the Battle of the Bulge, perhaps. Some little like more personal movie, perhaps. Right. And there was a really bad budgetary...
Isn't it set in Italy?
No, it's set in Germany, Siegfried Line, set on the Siegfried Line.
Oh, right, of course.
And there was loads of trouble on set, so the budget ran out, and the I think it's Warner Brothers who put it out. Oh, sorry, Paramount Pictures, actually. Paramount Pictures didn't want to put any more money into the production, so they had issue with blanks. Steve McQueen didn't like some of the bits that he was in, so he got involved, and it was all like a big issue. And then because of the budgetary constraints, the movie just ends. So there's a massive... So the plot of the movie roughly is this unit go up to the line, and they're on a bit of the Siegfried Line that's being held at one end by the Germans, and they're on the other bit of the line, and they look around and they're like, oh my gosh, we're the only guys here, and it's like a platoon strength that are holding the line. So they have to deceive the Germans to make them think that there's more of them. So they get a Jeep and they rev it around and drive it around and like do something to the engine so it might sound like tanks in the distance. They realize that the Germans are tapping their phone lines, so they get Bob Newhart, the comedian who's in his first film role, to sort of yammer some stuff back and forth that's complete hogwash. And it's sort of like sort of them trying to sort of survive the night, survive the 48 hours before the reinforcements arrive. And then the movie ends.
I guess that's a little bit Pork Chop Hill.
A little bit Pork Chop Hill. And then they have a massive attack, full frontal attack at the end, massed infantry attack that just seems to go a bit wrong. I won't go into what happens to McQueen's character and stuff, it's a bit spoilery, but there's a big set piece at the end with McQueen, and the movie just ends. And it is such an interesting end to a war film where it cuts right at the climax. And I enjoyed that. I thought it was a really tight little movie. James Coburn's in it, as I said.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Bob Newhart, Bobby Darin, directed by Don.
Darin's it. I've forgotten Bobby Darin was in that. So that obviously was intended to be a big movie.
Of course,
you've got Coburn, Bobby Darin, Newhart, McQueen.
And it's in 1962, so it's before Great Escape, but it's just about when McQueen's picking up his big sort of traction in his career. So it's interesting for him to see another sort of war movie, and he's got his jacket, he's wearing an M41 field jacket, he's looking cool. He's got an M3 grease gun with jungle mags, which he keeps having to reload because the blank's not cycling properly. Yeah, which is really interesting.
Which becomes kind of like a weird feature of the movie, doesn't it? That the reloads.
Everyone's having issues.
Jams and stuff.
Yeah, but it's a good film. Solid. I think it's a solid film. It's an interesting plot. There's definitely lots to talk about. And if you like McQueen, if you like early 60s cinema with McQueen in it. I mean, you can go wrong. So I'd recommend Tennis for Heroes.
It must be a good few years since I saw it last.
Yeah.
I do remember it being interesting and quite good, actually. He's very almost sultry in it, isn't he? He's sulky.
Yeah, he does sulk. And then at the end, he has this sort of, he rallies a bit and he becomes more of a hero.
Yeah, he's very moody in that one.
Yeah.
It's an interesting movie. Definitely one to cover, I think, that one.
They talk about how he was a former sergeant and he was court-martialed, and perhaps it was something really bad or perhaps it was something gallant. I can't remember what exactly he did get court-martialed for. But it's definitely an interesting film. You can tell it's Pirosh because it's men in combat and how combat affects them, and it's a little bit more. It's less about it's more about the men in war rather than the actual war. It's about the actual men's experiences. But as we said earlier, it would be nice to see the Pirosh version of the film, because I was expecting something akin to Battleground, and at times it's doing that. But then at times it's trying to be a Hollywood blockbuster, machine gun bullets hitting the floor with dust coming up and men running full frontal at
It's definitely bunkers. A darker movie than Battleground, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
With the way that McQueen's dealing with things, he's clearly processing.
Something snapped in his head.
What the war has done to him.
Yeah. And the way they sort of... I mean, so we might as well mention it is a spoiler, but the way they kill him off.
Sorry, I spoiled Geronimo for everyone.
the way they for 62 at least, the way they kill off McQueen's character. So he's attacking the bunker, and he gets a satchel charge from somewhere, and everyone's getting gunned down by this MG42 in the bunker, and they're all running at it, and it's really, giving everyone a bad day. So McQueen plucks up the courage to throw the satchel charge at the bunker and blow it up.
Yeah.
But as he's going, he gets hit a few times, and the satchel charge bounces off the emplacement, and it doesn't go where he wants it. So he gets the courage to go and throw it into the vision slit of the MG42 gunners have, and it explodes. But as it explodes, it obviously kills McQueen, and you get a really nice shot of him cowering, waiting for the explosion, knowing that it's going to kill him, and the shot's quite nice. It's an overlaid explosion, but it looks really good because it takes the whole screen up.
Yeah.
And then it's about 5 minutes after that, the movie just ends. And you're like, oh, okay. It's showing you that he maybe is just like one man in the whole grand scheme of the war, and what he did was brave, but the battle continues. That's what I got from it. I think it's quite a brave way to end a film. Now it might get lauded, and I don't know if it got lauded at the time, but...
Definitely one to dive into.
I think it'd be one for more explanation. And there's some good alley in there. There's a flamethrower. There's grease guns.
Yeah, there is. The satchel charge is an interesting inclusion because they're not featured in a lot of films.
No, they're not. And it's nice to see grease guns. I think that's show and tell for this week, everyone. Let us know if you've seen Geronimo or Hell is for Heroes. We'd love to know. As always, like, share and subscribe like we always say. Follow us on the Twitter. You can support us on Patreon. We'd absolutely love it if you consider doing so.
And share the podcast with friends as well. That'd be really great. Help us spread the word about the show. That would help us reach more people. We definitely appreciate that.
Exactly. Yeah, please do. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new future episodes. Have a great week, whatever you're up to, and we'll see you again.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.